I'd like to go first to the superintendent of Tucson Unified School District. You can state your name for the record. Take a couple minutes to present your position, and then you'll answer questions from the committee.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to share some perspective, and it's been good to hear the conversation up to this point. I've been the superintendent of Tucson Unified School District now for 19 months, and so anything as of July 1, 2013 to this point, I can speak to with all due specificity. Anything that comes before that, I've had quite a bit of a crash course in understanding the two superintendents or the three superintendents in the short 5-year span that had the job before I did. So there's a whole lot of piecemeal that went between the point in time in 2009 when the district was granted unitary status and then when the court took it back. But I do want to mention just a few aspects of that I think will be of particular interest to some of the questions that are asked, just to be able to frame the conversation. The first thing that I wanted to point out, and you all have a trifold that we put together, and I appreciate the staff volunteering to get it together. If you open it up, there is multiple layers of audit and oversight for the district. So the first point I want to make is I'm not concerned with any level of additional audits on the district. At this point in time, we have a court-appointed special master, and I wanted to read some excerpts from a letter he issued on this matter. He looks at the budget item by item. We have the Fisher plaintiffs, and they have legal counsel that looks at the budget item by item. We have the Mendoza plaintiffs, who Maldiff is their legal counsel. They look at the budget item by item. The Department of Justice looks at the budget item by item. The court, the judge himself, Judge Burry, has appointed a special budget operation expert who looks at the budget item by item. And the federal judge approves the final budget. On top of that, we have our external audit annually that looks at the budget, and it's reported to the Auditor General. And so when you take a look at the levels of oversight, I'm not concerned that there'd be anything fraudulent in it. I wanted to read some pieces from the Special Master's letter dated March 24, 2015. Basically, he says in the first paragraph, midway through, the goal of type targeting is shared by the Tucson Unified School District, the plaintiffs in this case, and the court that ordered the desegregation plan known as the Unitary Status Plan. Indeed, the USP provides for annual audit to be conducted by an outside accounting firm. This audit report is scrutinized by the plaintiffs and by me as special master and is posted for public review. Going to the second paragraph, one sentence in, I think it is fair to say that no school system in the country experiences as much oversight of its budget than does TUSD. Not only are the plaintiffs, who include the United States Department of Justice, special master involved in reviewing the budget proposal, the district must report on a quarterly basis any significant variation in the expenditures provided in that budget. So when we come down to the question of are we doing what we want with the money, how we want, and spending it freely, in my 19 months as superintendent, I have multiple layers of federal oversight, multiple layers of plaintiff oversight. I have the Department of Justice's oversight. I have the Auditor General's office's oversight. And in the year that the performance audit is scheduled to be conducted, which is another layer of oversight that was just mentioned, if you add the forensic audit on top of that, we would actually have 4 audits going on at the same time, and my staff would be dealing with 4 audits. We'd have our standard audit, which is required by statute. We'd have the deseg audit, which is required by the court desegregation order. We would have the forensic audit, and then we'd have the performance audit. And so my staff would be providing documents to 4 different entities to be able to satisfy those multiple audits. And that is a challenge. In terms of what are the dollars used for, when the district was put back under court supervision, if you open up the first page of the trifold, what you'll note are a whole lot of positions and programs and services. I didn't write this up. I showed up after the desegregation unitary status plan had been approved. It was approved about 3 months before I became superintendent at Tucson Unified School District, so I can't claim any glory for it, and I really can't claim a whole lot of opposition made to it. I do know now that there is quite a bit in there that I think is excessive, but that's not my place at this point. Once a judge ordered it and said this is what has to be done, I have a choice. I can comply with what the judge says has to be done. I can comply with the programs that have to be offered, or I can be found in contempt of federal court. Really don't want to be found in contempt of federal court. And so when it comes down to it, what you see in the first fold out, all of these positions and all of these pieces are written into the unitary status plan, or the desegregation plan that was approved by Federal Judge Burry. And so I don't have the option to say I don't want to do this. If I get to the point that I want to make a shift or adjustment in the unitary status plan, I have to submit it to the judge. I have to ask for a revision. I have to wait for the plaintiffs to provide their perspective on the revision. I have to wait for the judge to rule on the revision. So, you know, I'm a West Texas boy. I come from an oil field construction family. We've been in business since 1980. And if there's one thing that we despise more than anything from my family's business, it's a whole lot of federal oversight. And where I am right now, I'm experiencing a tremendous level of federal oversight in this. And so if the state wants to pitch a bit more oversight into this, I guess it won't do too much more harm, because as it sits now, I wanted to make the point that, am I trying to get out of this case? I'm going to give you an example. The Tucson Unified School District, this court order is as old as I am. I'm 40 years old, and so is the case. 4 generations have come and gone. I find myself trying to explain this desegregation court case to parents, and it's really hard for them to grasp, because it doesn't make sense in an open enrollment state where you have choice and you can pretty much go anywhere you want. But that's not the way the judge sees it, and that's not the way the plaintiffs see it, and that's not the way the Ninth Circuit saw it when it turned the court case back on its head and said you're back under court supervision. I have my own theories as to why that was done, but again, they're just theories and I don't want to speak to that. But TUSD had used the same law firm for 39 years. The same law firm for 39 years, and unsuccessfully got out from under court supervision. One of the first things I did when I took the job is I changed law firms. You know, I like working on cars, and if I take my car to the same mechanic and it continues to break down, I switch mechanics. And so 39 years of the same law firm is a heck of a long time to get really bad results, so we switch law firms. So we're with a new law firm, because my intent is to get out of the desegregation court case, because I'm not real interested in a heck of a whole lot more federal oversight. I'd sure like for the second largest district in the state of Arizona to be back under the purview of its locally elected governing board, and the elected state officials that sit in this House and sit in the Senate, and that'd make a heck of a lot more sense for us to be in the same situation as others. In terms of what we're doing, in terms of looking at the financial aspect of this, I'd sure like to review the desegregation primary tax rate and what's charged for that. And my goal would be, in working with our CFO, to begin levying less taxes on the primary tax rate for desegregation. It's in our 5-year strategic plan, the first 5-year strategic plan in the district's 147-year history, that we want acknowledgement by the business community as a better plan than the Tucson Phase 1 plan and the Oro Valley Phase 1 plan. We want business community acknowledgement for the detail of this plan, because my goal is I'd sure like to be able to ask the voters for their support on the secondary tax rate through an override or through a bond, and it not be an imposition of a tax as you find with the desegregation levy and the primary tax rate. I'd rather the community feel that we've earned their trust and they give us the dollars than be the situation it is now that they take the dollars. So I'll end with this final point and most definitely entertain any questions. The thing that really gets me about the way I looked at the legislation, and I asked for quite a few eyes to be put on it, is the year that the forensic audit would take place, 16-17, is the year I get permission to go before the court and ask for the court to remove us from federal oversight. And that would be the year that you have to think about the way a fiscal year goes. We start in July, we end in June. So if you're auditing the 15-16 school year, that ends in June, right? And it takes 6 months to get this done. I'm into the school year that I'm trying to show final good faith effort to the federal court to say, let me out of this DSEG court case, and I got funds frozen until this audit is done. That's how I read it. And if there's going to be an amendment to it, I'm all for it. Because my contention is, if you want to throw another audit on us, it's fine. I mean, I'm going to have to pay my staff overtime, and we might need to bring in some additional people for help. But bottom line is, I'm here asking for y'all's assistance in the sense of, don't freeze the funds in the year that we're applying for unitary status to get out from under this court order, and for the court to find us out of good faith, because the dollars have been frozen until this audit's done, because it takes 6 months. And now I find myself under further years of court supervision. I'd sure like to get over it. And so entertain any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for coming down here, and thank you for staying for most of the day. I know you've been here for quite some time, so appreciate your patience. So I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate your efforts at the school district, and your testimony indicating that you're working to get out from under the court order. And I apologize, I missed some of the details, but it sounded like that you also indicated that your effort in getting out from under the court order would also be to get out or to eliminate this desegregation tax levy. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, sir. We want to strategically back out of it. I mean, it doesn't make sense one day to have a certain amount of money and have a certain amount of programs, and then tomorrow for it all to be gone. We'd like to begin pulling out of the tax rate and going out for bonds and or overrides to address our needs with the support of the community, as opposed to an imposition on the primary tax rate. So that is written in our 5-year strategic plan that's posted on our website, that did win the PEMA Metropolitan Alliance Common Ground Award for planning and being forward thinking. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm glad to hear that is the effort. This desegregation levy was levied for that particular purpose, is to segregate, and that is your goal, to get the unitary status from the court and to acknowledge that desegregation has occurred, and that purpose for this levy is no longer there. But just one clarification: it does look like that in the bill, it does say that the audit shall examine the desegregation expenses of that school district for at least the most recent fiscal year. So if the audit occurs over this year, let's say it begins at the general effective date of this bill, and it ends, the audit is concluded by the end of this year, then under this bill, the audit could be applied to the most recent fiscal year. So that does give us the time frame to be able to complete the audit, complete this contingency in this statute prior to fiscal year 17. So none of these desegregation levies are frozen. Were there any questions for the superintendent? We have a list here. Representative Cardenas, and then I saw another hand, Representative Mock. Okay, Representative Cardenas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, sir.
Reading your comments regarding your opposition to this bill, it looks like a very long-winded, very very thorough explanation of your opposition.
Sound like my wife.
Oh man, what a night. So I know you don't want the funds withheld when the audit takes place. If the funds are withheld, could you tell how that would impact your staff?
Sure. If the funds are withheld, and again, if the audit were to take place for the current fiscal year, which is 14-15, and give us enough time for adjustments to be made and dollars not to be frozen when we apply for unitary status in 16-17, I think we'd be fine. The way that I'm reading this now is the evaluation would be the 15-16 year, which wouldn't give us enough time to be able to budget for the 16-17 year, which would freeze positions. And so basically everything you see on this panel here would be at risk of us being able to find the dollars in our general maintenance and operation budget to move forward with this, which creates a conflict with the federal court when they're wondering why we're not offering these services that are in the unitary status plan. Because what y'all have to remember is when that unitary status plan was approved, 910G funds weren't a question, and so the court took a look at all the things in the unitary status plan and said, well, heck, they can be paid for with ARS 15-910G funds. And so that was their design. There wasn't any conversation at that point that they were going to be pulled out of place. So it put us in peril of being out of compliance with a federal court order.
Mr. Cardenas. Ms. Bott?
I got to do the math real quick.
We can come back to you, Representative Mock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Sanchez, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to a question that was earlier asked, or at least a comment that was made, about why your money is so different from some of the other school districts that have received these SEC funds.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Mock, the way our dollars are accounted for is extremely different, in the sense that there was a point in time in TUSD's history where the discretion was that of the administration recommending it to the governing board approving the use of those dollars. And that time's been long gone. as a matter of fact, tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, I have a meeting with a special master who's been appointed by the court, and we're looking at the budget that we're building for the next fiscal year. And so everything that we expend, we have to show what did we spend this year, what are we proposing to expend next year, what are increases and decreases and why. I mean, we're having to go through our budget at that level of specificity as it relates to the aspects of the unitary status plan. Now, this money is bifurcated in the sense that we also have Office of Civil Rights obligations that were brought forward. And so, you know, one of the questions that was brought up is, well, why the heck is TUSD trying to build a bigger, better governing room, or governing board meeting room? Well, that's a simple answer, and it goes to your question. Back during the Mexican-American Studies time frame, there were quite a bit of folks that felt they needed to have access to those meetings, and the TUSD governing board was too small. And there were folks that felt they needed translation services, and none were provided. So these folks filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, and basically the Office of Civil Rights said you have two choices. You can build a bigger governing board room where you can fit people, and you can do it through agreement, or you can fight us on it, and if we win, you have to pay those legal costs, and you still have to build a bigger governing board room to meet this Office of Civil Rights obligation. And so it made sense that more than likely we weren't going to prevail in this, because it was well documented that people didn't fit into the governing board room. So we asked the federal judge, because all these dollars are being looked at, we asked the federal judge to weigh in on this, and the federal judge said he's not getting in the way of an OCR agreement. So the federal judge agreed that these funds should be expended for the purpose of this governing board room to keep us out of more legal trouble with the federal government. So you can see why I'd sure like to get out from federal oversight, make life a little more easier. But that does speak to why we're building this thing. I wouldn't want to spend the money on it if I didn't have to.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair and Dr. Sanchez. I kind of want to get back to a question earlier asked by Representative Cardenas, and he mentioned something about what would happen to programs and teachers and such. And I know that TUSD has had trouble filling some of the teacher positions as is. How would that affect it, and would you have to close schools? What other specific effects would this have if we held those money?
And to that point, before your answer, that would only occur if the audit did not occur. Please proceed.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Mock, if these funds are delayed or withheld, as you know, we can't write people IOUs and say, don't worry, the money's coming, we'll give you a check in 3 months. And no district maintains enough cash balance to be able to pay for the 600 positions that are touched and required by this unitary status plan for a series of 3 or 4 months while we wait for things to be cleared. So it would have a catastrophic effect that's twofold. We'd have to lay people off, we'd have to cut bus routes, we'd have to cut services, being some tutorial services, potentially having to take a look at closing and shuttering buildings. We'd have to look at upping class size, and more than likely we'd find ourselves in contempt of court and be out of compliance with a federal court order.
Further questions? Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Dr. Sanchez. So it sounds like you said you will have 3 audits going on, and you have yearly audits. You have to, the governing board has to submit a budget that says how you're spending those desegregation dollars every year. It's not enough.
I'm sorry, point of order. Not point of order. To the point.
To that point, Representative.
The yearly audit.
If you pull your microphone down.
Boards.
Now, I understand that there's an independent audit that's done, but you have to submit your budget on how you spend your deseg dollars and have that voted in a public meeting. It has to be posted, like the budget here, it has to be posted weeks in advance, reviewed by the public, and then voted on by the board.
Yes, sir.
So again, I'm getting back to my bang for the buck, because we're talking about spending $1 million of when we're cutting funding for education on an audit that I'm, having been on a school board that was under a deseg order, $1 million is a lot of money.
Yes, sir.
Is that the way you would spend the $1 million? And do you, you know, it's your district. But with the amount of auditing that's being done, how easy would it be to hide, you know, if you're misspending the dollars? And it sounds like, and Mr. Allen's back, when he asked earlier, well, is there a way you can show us how you're spending the money? You've listed about 6 of those ways that you already have to show how you're spending those dollars. So, you know, my challenge here is that, having been on the governing board, we made cuts for the 8 years I was on the governing board. And if I had that money, I'd rather spend it in the classroom, not on administrative costs. So,
Representative Allen.
Mr.
Yep, to that point.
Yes, I have to that point. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Myers, I didn't say we should just ask them. I thought the audit would test the veracity of their accounting principles. And I think that that's a little bit different than just kind of asking the question.
And also to that point, I think that the purpose or the intent of the bill's sponsor is to gain further information and illumination on what are the projects that the desegregation dollars are spent on. I recognize that there are reporting requirements for the desegregation budget, and I believe that it indicates that 80% or so around there is spent on salaries and benefits, as is 80% or so of the general operating budget. And so I think the intent of the bill's sponsor is to gain further illumination on what are the specific projects that are occurring, do this forensic audit that goes in on a transaction by transaction basis and looks at more detail on what is the district gaining with the dollars that are being levied for this specific purpose. Dr. Sanchez.
Mr. Chairman, and to speak to that point, on July 1 of this year, the district is moving to Infinite Visions, which is a software program used by 93% of the districts in Arizona. What we've done with this software program, we've broken down that desegregation budget into 65 individual items with up to 9 additional accounting codes to account for these specific pieces, because that's what the court wants. So the question, Mr. Myers, or Dr. Myers, what can we produce to show how these dollars are being used? July 1, 2015, I'll have 65 separate accounting codes for all of the activities that are specified in the unitary status plan and the dollars that are allotted, encumbered, and expended. And we'll be able to produce that report. And that didn't exist prior to our work this year. When I came in, the district had 2 different budgeting software packages that were meshed together with a Excel spreadsheet, and we were spending too much money on 2 junk programs. So one of the moves I made coming in is we eliminated both junk programs, got rid of the Excel spreadsheets, and are moving to a program that 93% of the districts use in Arizona, and that we can easily report information to the Auditor General's office. And on top of getting rid of waste in that way and getting a more streamlined, cost-efficient, cost-effective program that will also reduce my human resource costs, I'll be able to give you those 65 specific line items with 9 additional indicators on how those dollars can be cut and sliced any way you want that program or an Excel spreadsheet will go. It's about as comprehensive as anything I've ever seen, and I've served as a chief financial officer in Nectar County, district of right around 33,000 students, and I was responsible for that district's budget as well. So I've never seen anything like this, and I think what the special master put down in the letter, where he basically said he's never seen the district scrutinized at this level. And this is a gentleman who has been around, I don't want to date him, but I mean, he is in his late 70s, and he's done this work for quite some time. And for him to make that statement, and he's all over the United States, I mean, it is what it is at this point.
Any further questions? Representative Meyer, I think we still have the floor.
Well, it would be a question, I guess, to the sponsor of the bill, or the people that are going to vote yes on this bill. Have they reviewed all these other audits that are done before we request another audit? Did the sponsor leave?
I don't see the sponsor in the room.
And so I guess, that there's he left, so I can ask him this question. But I mean, there's going to be at least 3 more audits. There's a yearly board budget that's done. that documents how all these dollars are spent. There are court hearings that are held to document how all these dollars are spent. So to spend another $1 million asking for another document that details the same things that are potentially already being done before they've been looked at by, and I can't speak for the sponsor of the bill, he's not here, or anyone on this committee that's going to vote to spend these dollars, doesn't make sense to me.
Representative Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you read the bill, is it clear to you what timeframes exist in this, and can you expand on that?
Chairman, Ms. Mock, no, it's not clear, and that was when I signed in. I put, you know, I would rather spend $500,000 because I didn't know that was the amount until I just heard it now. So I'd rather spend $500,000 in our district in getting us out of the DSEG court case so that I don't have this federal oversight and we can begin making adjustments and scale back on the primary tax rate. So, I mean, up until this point, I had no idea that it was $500,000 in cost. You know, and as I take a look at this audit, I mean, from a former chief financial officer's point of view, I'm going to say something that's kind of interesting to this. We produce a heck of a lot of documents. I sure hope somebody reads this one if y'all do it. I mean, if y'all do it, I hope somebody reads it, because we have all kinds of audits and reviews, and I hope somebody reads it. I mean, that's it. We read it, we look at it, we make adjustments, we send it to our audit committee, we adjust our processes. 3 years ago, the district had 64 audit violations. We're down to 15, and we want to be down to 0. And so are we trending in the right direction? I'd say we are, but if somebody commissions this thing, I just hope somebody reads it.
And just as a follow-up, are you clear as to what happens after the fact? And
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. I mean, that's, Chairman Smart, that's why I signed in. I mean, I wanted to get an idea of the timeline so that I'm not out of compliance and so that I can apply for unitary status and be out of this and have an idea how the funds are going to come and go, because in taking a look at it all, while the audit's going on, if funds are frozen, it doesn't provide any taxpayer relief because those dollars are still collected. And at some point they have to be released, but by that point I don't know if I'm going to find the teachers and the people that I need to be in line with the unitary status plan or the DSEG court order.
And as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, so to me it sounds like you haven't been approached really on any of these issues or any of the accusations. So no one, not the sponsor, no one came to you and asked you about how this would affect TUSD or what you could do to improve without this DSEG bill.
Mr. Chairman and Ms. Mock, yesterday when I found out about this, because it arrived on my desk a little late, I made a phone call to Representative Finchem's office and asked if I could speak to him and just kind of understand what he was needing. And I was told by people in his office that he called me between 5 and 5:30. I gave him my personal cell phone number and my office number, and I waited and I never got a call back. And so I didn't really have any clarity on any of this until I'm sitting here listening to what's going on today. I'd have loved to have been able to sit down and talk about all the things I've talked about with you. Probably could have saved y'all all a lot of time.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, we now have Senator Steve Farley.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Cardenas.
one question of Dr. Sanchez.
Dr. Sanchez.
Thank you.
Representative Cardenas.
Mr. Chair and Dr. Sanchez, I know what the sponsor is opinion on this, but just based on the letter from the special master, do you think it's even possible or likely that they would approve using DSEG funding to pay for this forensic audit?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cardenas, you know, my experience is anything that doesn't come out of a lot of negotiation and a lot of debate isn't easily approved. I mean, it's not an easy process. Maybe it'll be easier for you than it has been for us because you're the legislature. I don't know, but it sure hasn't been easy for us. It takes us anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 months to get final word out from the federal judge, and it's all about the way the unitary status plan's timeline's built. We provide our response, then they have 20 days for both groups to provide their response, then for the DOJ to provide its response, for the special master to provide a response. In terms of questions that come back to us, we answer the questions, we send to the special master, he provides it back to the plaintiffs. They decide if it's good enough. If they do decide it's good enough, then he makes a recommendation to the judge, and the judge has a timeline to rule. If they don't decide it's good enough, then the special master can get with us and we can come up with some kind of agreement. Then he sends it to the judge. The plaintiffs at that point can then tell the judge that they don't agree with the special master, they have another level of review, and then finally the judge rules. So that's pretty much it. So in terms of an expedited process, it's true government timeline.
All right. Senator Steve Farley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members.
If I could just, we've got a few more folks signed in to speak. We've had a lengthy discussion to this point, so let's try to not repeat things that have already been said, but if you have anything further you would like to add to the discussion, please.
Thanks.
Senator Steve Farley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. I will keep it to points that I haven't yet heard or addressed. I am a senator of District 9. It's good to be in a homecoming to my political cradle here. See some of my old friends from the House. Along with Stephanie Mock, who is representative of District 10, the two of us represent all 47,000 kids in TUSD and their parents. More important to me, I am the parent of a sophomore at Tucson High Magnet School. She is actually in the desegregation program. She's in there because I think it's being run great at this point. I hope you've been able to see from talking with our new superintendent that this is not your father's TUSD. There is a whole new spirit at TUSD, and I, as a father and parent in TUSD, I checked it out very, very carefully. I visit the classrooms, I see the great jobs the teachers are doing, what the administrators are doing, and as a parent, I am very, very happy with the direction TUSD is moving in. And I believe that they're not just more responsive to parents and to the kids, they're also responsive to taxpayers in the district. And that's why there's no one from my district who's approached me to say we need some sort of forensic audit. It's important to point out that Representative Fincham does not represent any part of TUSD. And as the superintendent pointed out, he did not take the opportunity to actually talk to Mr. Fincham, or talk to Mr. Sanchez, or to look at the audits or do anything else in this regard. So I would like you to look at my perspective on this. And I did want to correct a couple of things. Mr. Fincham mentioned ATRA in his open testimony. I called Kevin McCarthy yesterday about this striker. He said ATRA was not in support of this, and that's why they are not here testifying today. So I think that's important to have that out there.
To that point, do you mean to imply they are in opposition to this bill?
No, they are not, neither in opposition nor support. I didn't make that clear on it. They do have issues with the DSEG districts, but I think you heard that Superintendent Sanchez also has issues with the DSEG district. It's just they're fighting very hard to try to get out from under the court order right now. So to do anything that would make it difficult for them to do so would be countering our ultimate goal here. Regarding your reading of the year in which this would be audited and the current year, the way I read it, and I think that's the way TUSD reads it, when it says it needs to include the most current fiscal year in a 2016-2017 audit, that means 2015-2016. And that fiscal year is not closed until August 31st of fiscal year 2016-2017.
To that point, it doesn't say that it's a 2016-2017 audit. It mentions the 2016-2017 year in two instances, talking about if it doesn't occur before the 2016-2017 year, then the authorization to levy this particular property tax expires. But then in the paragraph that talks about the audit, it mentions that any of the school districts who are going to budget over $15 million in the 2016-2017 year, that this applies to them, that they need this audit to have occurred, and the audit shall examine the desegregation expenses of that school district for at least the most recent fiscal year. But certainly it can be clarified. It sounds to me like that was the intent of the bill sponsor, that when the audit occurs, it has to occur prior to this time, fiscal 17, and when it occurs, it has to be of at least the most recent fiscal year, but not more than the 3 most recent fiscal years. Right. Well, but I agree, it certainly could be clarified.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it needs to be clarified, but even if it is clarified to be the year before that year, it's still a matter of spending $500,000, $1 million of district money on an audit that would be the 4th audit of the year in which it is being audited. And given that there is no evidence, given the levels of audits they have undergone and are continuing to undergo based on this court order status, I don't believe they're going to be discovering any forensic audit level crimes or misdoings. And considering that the sponsor of this bill has not seen those audits, has not taken the opportunity to talk to the superintendent, has not done his due diligence, I'm not clear at all that this is something we want to do, given how much they're under. And frankly, now that TUSD is finally on the right course after years, some may say decades, I don't want to mess with this. I got a kid there, so I got skin in this game. And I think it's time for us to move forward, move past these battles that have racked this legislature and TUSD for too long, and keep this guy here, frankly. So I appreciate if you would not support this bill today, and we move forward, and I'm sure he'd be happy to deliver every single audit that he hits his desk to every single one of you, so you can see everything that's being spent and how it's being spent.
Thank you, Senator Farley. Representative Bowers.
Mr. Chairman, a question for Senator Farley and even Representative Mott. In as much as you represent the district, and I can understand that. How do you feel about the DSEG order? Do you want to be out from underneath it?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bowers, absolutely I do. I agree with the superintendent.
Has that
I think
been your position?
It's been more than 30 years now. It is my position. I'm in public in that position. I'm speaking publicly right now. That once demographics have changed as dramatically as they are in the district, along with the open enrollment status that wasn't in place at the beginning of it, I'm not understanding the judge's position at this point. I would love TOS to be unleashed under this new leadership to be the best district it can be. And they're doing that already. They've just got this ball and chain tied to them that I'd like them to get out from under, and that's why they're doing it, and I support them. But I don't think we should put another ball and chain on them to make it harder for them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Peterson and then Representative Bowers.
I had the same